Okay, hello everyone and welcome to this session. Really pleased to have you all here to talk about how we teach and facilitate online. And obviously this is something which a lot of us are somewhat familiar with. Some of you are very familiar with this. Some of you may have been teaching and facilitating online a lot. Some of you may have done this in part and delivered hybrid in terms of some face-to-face delivery and some online delivery. But of course, in the times that we have at the moment, a lot of us are now moving more and more of our teaching online. Now, as EuroCHRIE Director of Industry, I have been asked to deliver this session and share some best practices and some intelligence around how we can best facilitate and teach online. In my normal day-to-day life, when I'm not working with EuroCHRIE, I'm Operations Director for Russell Partnership Technology. And we deliver a whole range of programs and things, and I will touch on that a little bit later. But of course, the main focus today is on how we teach and facilitate online. Now, of course, it's important to say that some of this, of course, is opinion and sort of my best practice. So, of course, this is always open to interpretation. And of course, there's always different ways to do things, and everyone has their own style as well. So I'm not here to say that anyone is doing anything right or wrong. This is just a case of sharing things that I have found that have worked from my own experience and from what I've heard from other people as well. So now is the first time for many of us that we're teaching fully online. Because of course, at the moment, a lot of us are in lockdown situations where we have no other choice but to deliver online. Now, I think the key thing to say here is that when delivering online, we should always be prepared for the fact that it will take time to adapt anything that we teach to an online delivery format. We shouldn't expect to be able to switch immediately over and move online seamlessly. So be prepared for that fact, that moving from the bricks environment of a university setting or a college setting to a click environment of everything being online is not necessarily going to be straightforward. There'll certainly be some bumps along the way and some things that you need to take into account in order to improve. Next thing to say is that don't always think that face-to-face content that you've delivered in the past will directly translate to online, because that's not always the case. Content has to be adapted to fit the delivery style. Often, it's best to develop the course and then work out how to deliver it. Now, of course, that's not going to be necessarily possible during these days because we're having to take things that were delivered face-to-face and move them online. The key thing to always come back to when thinking about this is to always focus on the learning aims. The learning aims are first and foremost the thing that we should be focusing on, and then we should be thinking about the best ways that we can deliver those. Now, it's an old saying, but I think it's very valid in this situation. But if we fail to prepare, then we should prepare to fail. So we should always be preparing as much as possible for our online delivery. Because of course, when we're face-to-face online, things can move forwards very, very quickly. And unlike face-to-face delivery, there's less time to deal with things on the fly. If things happen within the classroom environment, I think we all have various different coping mechanisms for how we deal with things like that. Those are all very different online. So we have to try and be prepared for those things. So do try and foresee those eventualities you think may happen. Now, there's some really basic things in that environment. So things like having batteries charged on laptops or plugged in. Maybe it's a case of having a spare headset or earphones so we can move over if something doesn't work. And of course, trying to make sure that we minimize any distractions that we have as well. Next kind of heading area to talk about is that when delivering online, we really must make sure that everything we deliver is 100% clear. We can't leave any room for interpretation. When we deliver things in a face-to-face environment, we can read expressions better. We can see if our audience of students has understood things. It's much, much harder to do that in an online context. So another thing to do is to make sure that people are understanding things as you're delivering in an online way. So don't be afraid to ask, have we understood that? Was that clear? It's never a bad thing. We don't want to go too far down the track. Otherwise, that could be an issue if we're going down the path of assuming understanding when it maybe hasn't been understood. Linked in with this is a key thing that improvisation doesn't really work in the same way as it does in the classroom. So online, it is okay to improvise, but again, it needs to be done in a bit more of a planned way because things can look a bit more disjointed in that online context. Moving to one of the key parts of the topic that I wanted to cover today was looking at how we can utilize technology, which obviously we're already doing when we're online, but continuing to think about the other elements of technology that we have at our disposal. Really do try and be a power user with all the technology that you deliver in terms of the online classroom. And when doing that, make sure you really prepare and test everything. It's great to bring new things into the classroom in the online context, but really do prepare and test all those elements to make sure that they work in the way that you intend. Bear in mind that when you're delivering online, it's highly likely you're going to have no technical support. So do always be thinking about how that's going to work. In a university context, we often have technical support, maybe not next door, but it's down the corridor. We can go and get some support. We don't necessarily have that when we're by ourselves in an online context. So be aware of troubleshooting, be aware of how you can solve issues that may arise as you come into contact with them. And a phrase I often like to use is try and think about having an escape plan. Now, I don't mean getting up and leaving the room. I mean, have an idea that if this happens, then I'm going to do that. So if you've got exercises planned, if it doesn't work, have an alternate plan you can move to if that doesn't work in the way that you intend. Continuing to think about the technology, the actual equipment that you have is going to be really important. Now, some of this may be things that you can change. Some of it may be things that are harder to change. So do make sure that your computer is up to date in terms of any of those essential updates that get rolled out, because some of the programs you're using in terms of the LMS or these online conferencing tools or all the other items that we're using will all require on the most recent updates for your computer. So don't do the classic thing of ignoring them and thinking I'll do them later. Do try and do those sooner rather than later. Also bear in mind that when we're delivering online, these programs take up quite a lot of processing power. So when you're in live sessions like we are here now, really do close other programs, things you don't need. If there's any other things that you have open on your computer that are not needed, close them off because it'll help the things that you do need to run quicker and better. Again, probably hopefully obvious, but make sure we've got notifications turned off, close the email, make sure the phone's off. We don't want to have any distractions and things like that. Obviously, we should be using a headset. We should be making sure we've got the best Wi-Fi connection we can have. And if we are using conferencing software, try and have the best possible access that you can in terms of having a pro account. But of course, a lot of you will have those provided by your institutions. But do make sure we've got that access all set up in the best way possible. A really key thing with online delivery is that audio quality is paramount. It's very, very important because if people can't hear you, they're going to struggle to follow and they're going to struggle to understand. All attendees must hear you perfectly. And of course, it's essential for those elements in all online deliveries that we have. So do make sure your online audio quality is the best it can be. If you are struggling with the connectivity issues, that's an opportunity where you may want to use your webcam to start off, and then you may want to close the webcam so that your computer can maximize the efficiency of the audio quality. It's going to be tough for some people, of course. Try and maximize and make the best possible work environment you can when you're delivering online. I know we're all working from home in these days, so do try and make your environment best it can possibly be. A personal thing for me is that I don't like to have a lot of clutter around me because I find that distracting. So do tidy and have things set up and make sure that you're sat in the right way and you're still doing those things that you should do. Now, thinking of online sessions can sometimes feel a little bit cold because you don't have that instant connection or that rapport with the people who would normally be in front of you when you're delivering. So online sessions can sometimes feel very much like it's a stand and deliver approach where you're not getting much back. So do try and add in key points where you can initiate discussions and then obviously think about how you're going to facilitate that. So potentially if you're delivering online and you have an hour's worth of content, try and pick out some key points or some key sections and note at those points that you're going to draw away and you're going to have discussion or you're going to ask for feedback. Now, there's some great ways you can do this. We're using Zoom here, and I'm sure that lots of people in the room we've got here and who will watch this later online will also be using Zoom. Zoom has a great feature where you can set up breakout rooms. So if you have a group of students, you can still split them into groups. You can then have them go work in their groups. You can have them work, talk together. If they need your help or if they want to ask you any questions, they can flag up that they want to ask you something. You can then pop into their room, you can answer the question, and then you can come out and then you're ready to help another room. And then a good thing to do is when you bring everyone back together, have one person from the group feedback, and then of course you can then bring out all the thoughts together. Another key thing to use is the chat function. Now we've obviously got the chat function open here, and of course if any of you have any chats that you want to send through as we go through, or any questions and things that you're thinking of, do enter that chat in, and we'll come to those at the end of this session. I would really encourage you to use the chat function. Some people get a little scared by the chat function and don't like to use it because they feel it gets a little overwhelming, which I totally understand. Another key thing to think about is that actually a lot of students really enjoy using the chat function, and you may get a lot more interaction from them by using that chat function. Some students will feel far more comfortable typing in a question or typing in some feedback than they would if you asked them to do it face-to-face or verbally over an online session. And of course, that does also get past the barrier of other people's technology in terms of them having webcams and microphones and things like that. The chat is a great way to do that. So do harness that and make sure you guide people to do it in the right way. As I said, ask key questions, get the chat, and then you can facilitate and draw that all together. Obviously, all of what we're talking about is communication. Communication is really, really key regardless of how we deliver. We always want to remain personable, but of course we want to remain professional. Moving to online can feel very chatty. So again, we want to retain that professional element. We need to make sure that people still view you as the teacher, the facilitator. We don't want to be too much like we're just a group of friends. And a key thing also to say is that we need to still maintain that fact that we want to be the motivator in the classroom. So with the online delivery style, sometimes it can be hard to build that enthusiasm, or it's hard to know if you have the enthusiasm at the other end. So really do be a motivating force in the online, bring the energy, and make sure if we are downhearted when we're delivering online, which can be hard when we're only looking at a webcam, but bring the energy, and that will help your students to feel that energy, and they'll feel motivated to listen and take on board the things that we're talking about. A really key point, be receptive to feedback. So if we get any comments from students that say they like certain things, that's obviously great. We get feedback that says they don't like things or they didn't think things worked well. It's hard not to take it strictly as criticism, but take it as an improvement point. Use that as fuel to improve what we're doing. As I said right at the start of this, we're not going to get things right all the way from the start. There's going to be a learning curve here, as there is with anything. So we need to take any of those improvement points, take them on board, think of how we can address them, and then obviously do address them and continue to improve. Now, coming back to technology, because obviously this was one of the key things that I wanted to mention as part of this, is it's a key area of my specialization in what I do on a day-to-day basis. I mentioned already, we don't have to use the webcam all the time. You'll find your own rhythm and the way that you like to do things in terms of using the technology you have available. Certainly try and use it at the start and at those key points because it helps personalize you, and it will help to sort of make things a bit easier in that regard. If you are using an LMS that maybe doesn't have all the features you want, then do look out there. There are lots of other programs that will allow you to do things. So if your LMS doesn't have the ability to set up things like really easy to use quizzes, which will again help with engagement and help you to ensure that your students are listening and interacting. Quizzes are a really good way of doing that, because if you put together, even it doesn't have to be much, it can be 5 to 10 questions about the content that you've been delivering. And then of course you can check that each of the students have fed back their answers, and they won't be able to get the answers right if they haven't been listening to what you've been saying. So these knowledge check things are a really important way of ensuring that. There's a great website, and again, I'll link this to all of you afterwards, called EuroCHRIE.com. You can create quizzes on there really easily. They've got a free model where you can go on there, and that's a really good way of making sure you get that bite back and that ensure you understand that the students will want to do those things as well. Another thing on technology, I really would encourage you to record all your sessions. We're recording this session. It's always a good idea to have the session recorded. You never know when you might want to refer back to it. So it might be that you want to refer back to it yourself. It may be that students have missed things and you want to share the link with them. I'm sure many of you have methods where you have to do this anyway. But just because this is new for some of us, you may have colleagues you want to share this with. There's many different reasons as to why we might want to record it, but it's better to have it and not to need it than the other way around. So I really would encourage you to record those sessions. I mentioned about the LMS, and I mentioned earlier about being a general technology power user, but really do explore all the features you have within your online learning management system. Obviously, I know a lot of us will be using a variety of different LMS systems. There's a lot of programs out there. Really do, again, try and be a power user of that LMS. I promise you there'll be more features in there that will help you. Don't feel like you have to try and use everything straight away. If you try and use all the elements straight away, then it probably will be overwhelming. Maybe just try and pick out the really key ones to start with, get to grips with those, start to introduce them, and then we can start to build up our understanding and our sort of complexity with those from there. Some final thoughts before I kind of wrap up with a few other ideas around technology. If you do feel ill-prepared for dealing online, then it will probably show through to your students. So do put the groundwork in and be prepared to do that. It's not a bad thing to practice before you deliver certain elements. So the more prepared you feel, the more confident you will be, and that will come across to the students. There are loads and loads of online courses and content. There was already a lot of content, and of course, during these days of coronavirus, there's even more content available now, and a lot of people are pushing this out for free. So if there are areas of online presentation which you feel you need to improve on, do go out and look at what courses there are. Don't feel overwhelmed in having to do that, because obviously there is a lot we need to be doing at the moment. But if there is things you feel you can develop on, there's a lot of help out there. As we're doing here, talk to others and share best practices. So we've already got a good sized group of us here online, and there are going to be other people from the EuroCHRIE community who are going to be viewing this afterwards. So there's lots of opportunities to share best practices, reach out for help, reach out for guidance. There's always going to be people that will be there for help, and realize you're not in this alone. We're all going through this together. So again, that support is certainly there. I've mentioned this a few times, but it's all about constantly improving as we go. That's both in terms of the style and the delivery. So it's the content that we have and also the style in which we deliver it. And just remember, the more that we do this, the better we're going to get. Remember that we are all facilitators and teachers. Not all elements should be simply just speaking and the students listening. That word facilitator, it sometimes can be very hard to think about how we facilitate, especially online. And it's all those things you mentioned, like using the chat, doing the quizzes, trying to make sure that we bring people with us, and that they take on board all the elements that we have as we go through. Now, just a few final points in terms of my personal background, in terms of what I do on a day-to-day basis. There are obviously a whole range of other programs and things out there that can support you. And obviously from the attendance list, I can see here that we've got a variety of people. I know many of you, some of you I don't know. As a company, we deliver hospitality simulation programs. We also have some certification programs and some online content like our hospitality business acumen program. We also have apps that focus on things like revenue management. So if anyone's interested in all those things, this is not a sales opportunity for us. I'm not here to talk about all those things. But if anyone is interested in learning more about those things, then do connect with me afterwards. I'd be delighted to tell you more about those. Or if there's other things that you're looking to do. So if there's online tools and resources that you feel would be useful, or if there's any other help and guidance that anyone feels that they need, then in this role, I'm very happy to hear from people, and I'm very happy to give help and guidance. And if there's things that I can help with, either personally or we can help with as a company, then I'm very happy to do that. It's always a good thing to hear from people. Or if I know of other places I can send you to help with your questions, then I'm more than happy to do that. As I say, it's all about, as a community, having us all support each other. Okay, I hope all that was useful. I'm going to unmute people in a moment, and we can open out for any questions, because the key focus of the session today was not only about hearing some of the thoughts from me, but also about opening this out into a bit of a round table so that we can hear any key thoughts from anyone, either in relation to some of the things that I've been mentioning or to something else. Before we do that, I'll just open it out in a moment, so do have a think about that. But I just want to say thank you for all of you being here. It's been great to share these thoughts with you. So I'm going to unmute you all, and if anyone has any questions, do feel free to either ask over the webcam and through your microphones, or use the chat if anyone wants to mention anything.
Hi, I'd like to make a point. Hi.
Sure. Hi there.
Claire here. I think I'm actually come up as a room number because I'm in one of our university Zoom rooms. But either way, hi, Claire here in Germany. My experience, we've had at our university, we've had long meetings exchanging our experience, and we've got serious disagreements on whether we should insist, if you can, that students come online with a video. And if you talk about engagement, then of course it's nice if you see who you're teaching, yeah. But at the same time, as you correctly said, lots of people are sitting in kitchens, sharing rooms with several other students, whatever. Do you have any thoughts? I mean, I know it's only experience, or anybody else, on this issue of how important video participation is?
Yeah, I'll just give my thought very quickly, and then I'll open to everyone else. I mean, I think my overriding thought with that would be, I really do like the video aspect, and I think you mentioned that as well, in terms of, yeah, it's hard to have the engagement if you can't see who's there. I most of the time when I deliver online sessions, I like the idea of having a kind of webcam session at the start for 2 or 3 minutes, and then pulling away from that, because I think most people can create an environment where they can have 2 or 3 minutes where they can hopefully have no distractions around them. And then, of course, then it's a case of, if the webcams go off, then it's a bit easier. That would probably be my guidance on that. But I'll open it out to the group if anyone else has any thoughts on that.
This is Peter at ESSEC in Paris. I've been doing this for quite a while. We've been delivering some stuff remotely, and I've done both. What I find from the students themselves is that they prefer if they can see their compatriots, if they can see the other people, because then they don't feel they're alone. They don't feel they're on a kind of a one-on-one situation. So we use Zoom exclusively for doing this, which means that they can actually bring up the participant window and they can see about 10, 12, maybe 15 people at a time. Also, I would say that if you're dealing with like what we would call normal students as opposed to executives, many of them join from their phones. So it's not a big deal. I mean, I had a class last Friday and the weather was good, so many of them were sitting outside on their phones. But they had headphones on, you could see, and they were participating. So as long as you're varying the content every 15 minutes or so and getting them to do something interactive, so they're not just switching off, I think it's fine. My recommendation from the point of view of the presenter is definitely, I require them to put their video on unless they come back with a reason. And generally out of a group of 30, 40 people, maybe one person will come back and say, hey, my webcam's not working, or I'm covered in spots or something like that.
Perfect. Thank you for that feedback. I can see Anders has his hand up. I'll come to you.
Thank you very much. I would say I have it in a bit of a different approach to it than Peter has, or Peter O'Connor here. What I tend to do is, the more engagement I need with my students, the more I need to see them, of course. But if I have 45 people on a call, it doesn't make sense that I have videos, because I won't be able to have an overview of that. But it's more important for them to see me then. But then again, more of that is a one-way communication type of teaching. However, when I do make breakout rooms via Zoom, which I usually do, then I only have 5 or 6 people in one group or one breakout room, and then I actually require them to have a video on, because then it's much more interactive, and then I need to be able to see them. So I think depends on the style of teaching that you're doing. If you're doing more sort of workshop based, I would definitely say video. If it's more sort of classroom teaching, then I would say it's less important. But that's sort of my experiences with it. But I think it's very, very important to keep online session very dynamic. So sort of changing or shifting back and forth between formats have worked quite well for me. Right now I'm doing 3-hour online sessions in Lyon. And what I tend to do is to do very short joint session where we all together, where we do 15 to 20 minutes together. And then I break them out for maybe an hour for group work. And then I sort of visit all the breakout rooms that I have sort of on a continuous basis. And I sort of give them challenges during that by using the broadcast function in Zooms, which works quite well. And you have quite a good touch on what people want and what they need. And basically they can also ask for help. So you get a direct link that pops up on your screen where they have raised their hand or asking for help. And then you can just pop into their breakout room. So it's a good flow that you get into that. So I think that was a little bit more than just the audio and video, but audio of course is the most important. I would say video comes second for my part.
Perfect. Thank you, Anders. I can see Ada has her hand up, so we'll come to you. Oh, I think we're on mute. Sorry, I can unmute you. Hang on. There we go.
Okay. Yeah. Hi. I'm from American European Education in Romania. We've had some to switch to online classes for a few weeks in the last part of our semester. What we've noticed, I would like to mention two things. With some of you already mentioned, the more participants you have, obviously it's harder to have video on. And something that we've noticed is that it takes out from the internet. So having video or having a bad connection might also have to do with the video being on. So oftentimes that might be a quick way to fix a bad connection for the internet, to switch off the cameras. And another thing that I wanted to mention is that I think it would be ideal to have very clear set regulations or rules regarding this from the beginning, maybe even before the participant join the meeting. Like, you can join the meeting with no video, or all of you with video, or muting yourself from the beginning. I've recently had to attend an attempt to a webinar from the European Commission that had to be cancelled because there were so many participants that didn't know there were no ground rules from the beginning. So some of them had their microphones unmuted, some of them were muted. It was a mess because there were no ground rules from the beginning. So I'm in for that.
That's great. Yeah, I think I'd fully agree with that. Yes, I mean, when there's a load on technology, certainly turn the webcam off is going to be a help. And I think that's a very valid point. I think certainly just even having a few basic rules and guidelines on this is how things will work. So when you join, this is how it will be. And I say Zoom is very good at allowing the presenter to have a lot of control over that. So I think it's very good and very, a nice idea to be really clear on the way that things are going to happen. So yeah, thank you, Ada. That's a really good point. I can see that Salam has her hand up, so I'll come to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I'm from Jordan, from Amun Applied University College, and I would like to share my experience with you and to ask for advice as well. Because in Jordan, as you know, we are not that technologically advanced country. And, the lockdown just had forced us to move to internet. So it's very quite difficult, not for us as instructor, but also for students as well. The thing is, we've been using Google Classroom and Zoom. Well, as an experience, talking about my personal experience, Zoom is a very good tool in which you can see interaction with the students because you can read the body language, as you said earlier. The thing is, sometimes probably I don't know, it's the quality of connection we have. I don't know, but The problem is with the voice thing, with the audio, even without the video, that everyone in Jordan now is going online, not only universities, the internet connection is overwhelmed. This is one barrier, that students will automatically be disconnected. I've tried Google Hangout, I've tried many other applications. In the college, we work with the students on WhatsApp group. We have WhatsApp groups, and we try to communicate to be as much available as possible, not only during the 1 hour lecture, but throughout the day, so we can interact with them directly. Like, I teach 4 classes, and for every one of these classes, I have WhatsApp group, and I request to be specifically joined with the student just to see their comments, because some students are really shy to express, I do not understand, I don't get the point. At least this is in my country. I'm telling you my experience in Jordan. But the only difficulty I've been having is with the grading and marking assignments. I don't know what sort of a platform that is really friendly user that would enable you to set assignment and to grade well, and students would receive correct answer. I'm totally new to Google Classroom. I've been watching videos on YouTube on Google Classroom, how to set assignments, but the grading thing is still very difficult. So if you could recommend a platform that is specifically for assignments, I will highly appreciate your help.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, obviously it is a real challenge at the moment. I think one of the key things is, yeah, students are going to struggle with connectivity, especially when this has been something that they're not used to. I think one of the key things, as quite a few of us have said so far, is it's about being really clear and upfront with these are the things that are going to happen. So yeah, I understand as well about students being a little nervous about giving feedback. So I think it's always valid to try and give warnings so they have time to try and think about what they're going to say. So students often don't like being put on the spot to come up with something, but if they have maybe 5 to 10 minutes before we call on them, that's a little bit better. I definitely think that the point you were making about the assignments and assessment online is something we can open out. I can see Henry's got his hand up, so Henry, I'll come to you.
All right, thanks, Peter. Yeah, so a couple of things that I thought about. So one thing, I don't know if it's then becomes what people are doing. I've had the same experience. I've sort of ended up having camera on for a little while and then continuing possibly without camera for the reasons mentioned on image quality and also feeling that a first contact is important, but not necessarily after that. Then another point, what you also mentioned was the chat that I noticed right away. There's a lot of students who are really way more comfortable in using the chat function than actually asking a question. I mean, I teach at Institut Bocuse, so it could also be a language thing, but particularly if you have students who are not native English speakers, it seems that helps them in contacting. Another thing that, having thought now that I've practiced being clear on everything for many years as a teacher, I realized the importance of really being clear, even way taking that to a new level from what I've thought being clear is. It's quite amazing, actually. And then one final thought, we also use Microsoft Teams in addition to Zoom at IPB, which I've found kind of handy to have a dual communication with the classroom or maintaining the classroom sometimes for everyone to work in and sort of have the feel that the classroom is there while I've had individual chats with the students, and it's been pretty fast if you have that classroom. Obviously the breakout rooms could be used for this as well, but that's also been quite handy to be on both systems.
Great, thank you, Henry. I can see Anders has his hand up. I'll come to you.
Thank you very much again. Just sort of continuing what Salam was mentioning about using of different softwares and things like that. There are tons of great things out there, and I was thinking about it when you mentioned it, Peter, Russell as well, that there are tons of great softwares, but there's one thing that limits us in a little bit, and that's the GDPR aspect of things. And this is something that we've been teaching at UCN here in Denmark. We've been teaching online programs for the past 8 years and gathered quite a lot of things. And we have used, before the GDPR regulations came, we've been using tons of great online stuff. But if that's on a Chinese server, for example, we're not allowed to use it at all. So you need to know where these different applications come from and what servers they're on. So what our university have done is that they have sort of made a green list of things that you can use. And then we have sort of I don't know if I should say that, if it's recorded this session, but there is sort of a gray zone as well. And then there's an absolutely no-go. Mm-hmm. So we also have to be aware of these things. For example, we're not allowed to use WhatsApp from our university regulations, even though that would fit quite well. But to continue, what Henry was talking about is that we use different softwares as well. So we use Teams as well, and then we use. Actually, we don't have Zoom, sadly enough, but I'm very happy to be able to use that via Paul Bocuse and teaching my students in Lyon with that, because I do like that software, this software very much. But we use another system called Panopto, which is very, very good for in-class presentations. Because what the great thing about Panopto is that you can see your slides in your pre-recorded version here, and then if students want that exact point of the lecture around that, they can just press on the specific slide, and then the recording automatically goes to that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's about finding a great variety of different softwares which can help you with different aspects of the course that you're doing. Mm-hmm. And in relation to that, because what we learned in the beginning, because when 8 years ago, when we figured out that we should do online programs, we literally just recorded everything in one take, and then we just put it online, and then we were online. And luckily we learned a lot since then, because basically that no one is going to watch a 3-hour recording or something. We don't even do that as lectures. We get bored and it's not interesting. And think of our millennial class of students right now. Definitely they're not going in for a 3-hour session in anything at all. So what I think works quite well from a pedagogical aspect is that things that what I call as in seat or one-way communication or classroom lectures, I should say it. I pre-record that so they can watch that, and I have one requirement to myself that I'm not allowed to do more than 30 minutes in total. That is the absolute maximum that I do. And if I have a lecture that might need a bit longer time, I actually break it up into different themes as well, and I put that out to them before my live sessions. So basically, when we go through live sessions, I only focus on exercises or group work or whatever setup we have, but with the more interactive things. Mm-hmm. And then actually I do the same thing as Henry. I make sure to follow up on the live sessions and the pre-recorded session by using Teams. And I don't think it's only a French thing or Henry, but I think it goes for every single student that it's easier for them to ask questions in the chat, because you get much more. So I actually ask my students to ask questions in the news feed in Teams, because then everyone can see it, and it sort of becomes a FAQ stream instead. So you don't have to tell every single student the same or the answer to the same questions. So they go in and look, okay, have this been asked before? Perfect. Dun, dun, dun. And then everyone can look at it, and we can actually make a discussion in the thread underneath that specific post. I think the good thing about Teams is that it's very intuitive. So a good recommendation, find a software that is intuitive. That is the most important thing. And the more it reminds of the function that you see in Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, the better, because these are things that they know and they live in. So if they can use their own skills or online skills in a LMS system, that's just wonderful. Mm-hmm. So I think that was my 2 cents. I see there's it was Panopto. I'm going to spell it for you here.
Perfect. Yeah, I was just going to say, thanks, Anders. Yeah, if you could write that in there, that would be perfect. I think quite a few people were nodding at that point of interest. And picking up on your other point, I think it's definitely a very valid thing to say. Definitely, if we can break things down into more bite-sized chunks, as Anders said, it might be that you have 2 hours worth of content, which is great. But if you break that down into 4 30-minute sections, then you're far likely to get more interaction. And of course, that's much easier to follow and look back on as well. I just wanted to come back to, I know one of the questions that Salam had was on anyone's ideas and best practices around sort of assessments and how we can grade online. I was going to open that out to the room and ask if anyone has any good feedback or best practice on how you're doing that, or any advice on how to bring that in a better way.
Can I jump
yes,
in?
Please.
Yeah.
Yes.
Claire again. Hi. Firstly, just before I forget, what I found is not having too many different softwares. We have Zoom and we have Teams, same as Anders and Henry said. And you get a million suggestions. Stick to what you know, yeah, what you found out. I've got 2 new courses. I need to prepare them, whether they were on campus or online. And I was spending more time getting to know the software when I suddenly thought, hold on a minute, Zoom and Teams is enough. You mentioned Socrative. I'm more a Mentimeter or Mentimeter fan. Mentimeter, if you ask me, is brilliant. It also breaks up those 30-minute sessions. You can do word clouds, you can do everything. Free, 2 slides are for free. But Mentimeter, if you don't know it, have a look. Assessment, I'm not talking about types of assessment here. I'm just saying what we've done for a long time with any form of written assignment is they upload it to Turnitin, and you can grade in Turnitin. And you're doing a plagiarism check at the same time. You can grade online. They just need to click in and see it. And I do PowerPoint slides the same way. I know there are more, let's say, maybe revealing assessment tools where students can have different types of feedback. And if you set up a rubric and turn it in, you could do it like that. But my experience, just because we used that even when we were on campus, obviously the easiest for me is just to stay there with what I know until I have another form. But I think most people know Turnitin, but not all universities grade in Turnitin. Obviously, the university has had to pay that extra to have the grading function. It's not always available unless they do pay. But our experience is it works very well. So that's my contribution.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Claire. That's really valuable. I've got a couple of hands up. Ada, if I could come to you first.
What we've been using, it's not really, we're still perfecting it, but we're using Moodle. Moodle is the platform. It's sort of like Blackboard, but it's open source, and also it has a lot of plugins that we've been using, and it allows for us to handle online exams. So we've been doing that. You can build up a quiz in Moodle with various types of questions, from multiple choice to open-ended questions, and you can grade in Moodle. You can upload assignments there and also give feedback. So that's the tool that we've been using, because we know Turnitin, we know Blackboard. For us as a small school, budgeting wise, that's not an option. So Moodle is an open source, very, very okay. We also link it with a plagiarism check, so it works. Another one that I wanted to mention is, it's similar to Socrative. It's Kahoot, Kahoot. Again, another small tool that could spice up the online teaching.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ada. Henry, I'll come to you.
Yes. Yeah. Just a thought on what Claire said. Yes, I also think that submitting directly to Turnitin or Urkund, that makes it, if you haven't done that before in this environment particularly, it makes it a lot simpler and easier to keep things organized. But what I was actually really going to say was, I had an interesting experiment the other week, which was the first week when the schools were closed in France. I had already planned a role play assessment where students were going to negotiate prices and things. This was a revenue management course in groups with other groups. And I must say I was terrified on how this is going to go when suddenly each student was individually at home. And the students were a little scared as well. I could tell that, but I said, okay, we're gonna try this, because I actually had a few days to think about it, and I thought about it and said, I think this can work, and I think this can actually be a much better thing to do than some of the other options that I then was considering. And I must say so the idea was the students had to work in groups on certain tasks that I had for them, all remotely, because they were already back in their homes all around France and in China and all over the place, frankly. This was our master's program. And then those groups had to communicate with each other to do these negotiations. And it was a really good, interesting experiment to go there. And I had several comments from students who said, yeah, this was great. And compared to, doing something traditional, this was really refreshing, and that the online environment actually they didn't feel that this was a serious threat. Obviously, things were slower. There were things that you had to I gave them more time. Usually this is a very dynamic thing that I do in a day. I gave them some of the tasks the day before. I gave them more time. It was obviously easy to also do that because there was no classroom expectation or classroom issues. I could say, okay, we'll take, instead of a 1 hour lunch break, they asked if we can take a 2 hour lunch break so that they could still finish up things. And I said, for sure, that's fine. And I didn't have to ask anyone if there's room for that. But yeah, the sort of student to student interaction in groups, it actually did work quite well, and they were quite excited about that.
Perfect. Thank you, Henry. That's good to know. I just wanted to come back on one of the things that Claire mentioned, which I think is a really valid point. And obviously, in the last few questions, in the last 10 minutes or so, we've all kind of mentioned quite a lot of different programs, and obviously there's a lot out there. And yeah, I think it is really important to find what works, and not use too many different things. It's a case of make sure we've got a rationale and a reason for using things. Not just using things for the sake of it, and also making sure we're using the things which are going to improve the teaching and the learning experience, and we're not just using them because we think we should be using them. We've got about 5 minutes left. I want to make sure we finish on time, because I know obviously everyone's very busy in these days, as always. I just wanted to throw it open to the floor and ask if anyone had any final questions or final thoughts and things. I know anyone wanted to come back on, either click the button. I can see Ariane would like to feed in, so I'll come to you first.
Hi guys. Great to see you all. I think the points you've mentioned are really interesting. Andres, thank you very much for your points. It's important, I think, to engage the students. I just wanted, we're using Blackboard Collaborate. I don't know if anyone's using that software. But it's another option where you can record things and such. I just wanted to say some of the feedback that I received from my students was very interesting, because they find that the most important part of the webinars is, whatever system you're using, is the human connection. And just the fact that they're seeing us on a daily, weekly, whatever basis, it gives them, I think, warms their hearts. And I think that's important to share.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Ray, I'll come to you.
Yeah, I don't know where to put my hand up. I can't find the hand to put up, but anyway.
Sorry, you can do it physically, that's fine.
just before we finish, just before everyone sort of departs, just say thank you, Peter, for that, and to tell everybody that we will be putting it on YouTube with a link from the EuroCHRIE website, so you'll be able to find that. But what I've just sent a note round is that, are there any other sessions that anyone feels that will be useful? It seems to me that from listening to you that maybe grading assessments online would be quite useful if we could find somebody to do that, or some assessments for sure. And if anybody has any sessions that they would like to offer, if they can let us know, and then we can try and schedule it in and do that for the future. And also to remind you that there's another session on Wednesday which came around with the same email, which is more about managing and administration, but we will be organising some more for next week as well, so I'll send you those details around as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ray. Anyone else have any final comments or questions? Okay, fantastic. Well, we'll close things up for there, but as Ray said as well, thank you all for attending. I hope this has been really useful for all of you. It's been great to connect and see most of you on the webcams and to talk. I think we had some really lively discussions there. So as Ray said, there'll certainly be more sessions. Do try and join the session that Flo Hummel is doing tomorrow. And obviously, as we said, this will be posted online. So if you have colleagues or anyone you know would be interested, do that. And do continue to network. And as I said at the end of the presentation part, if there's any questions you've got, either come to us as EuroCHRIE or do send a message to me. Very happy to help, or at least point you in the right direction as well. So we'll leave that there for today. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your days, enjoy the rest of the week, and I'm sure we'll all connect really soon.
There's just a message from Ruth O'Rourke just come in. I don't know.
Yes, hi Ruth. Do you want to say something? Say hello, morning.
Good morning, everybody from the United States. I'm here in Harrisonburg, Virginia. So I'm at James Madison University. Just wanted to jump in just at the tail end of your meeting. Sorry I didn't get on earlier. I have a 5 and a 2-year-old. So those you might know, and a kitty. So just wish everybody a very good transition, and your colleagues here in the United States, we're here to help support you. I am the ESD chair, but I'm more than willing to help out in any way I can for anyone who might be willing or need some assistance. So even across the Atlantic Ocean, we're here for you. So
perfect. And likewise, thank you, Ruth. That's all great. So thanks for that input. As I say, Ruth's there if anyone needs any of the help from that side. Thank you all. Have a great day, and we'll speak soon. So thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.